so that anyone who would like to watch it later can.
Hi, I'm Steve Tattum, and I'm founder of Tattum Reading. And I'd like to do a little informal discussion just before we begin. This is going to be, for some of you, a whole new look at the concept of dyslexia, because dyslexia since 1896 and 95 was known primarily for its disability. And we now know it's not the case at all, that dyslexia has a flip side, which is a gift. And really, dyslexia is a new mind. And it's a way that look at, and kids who are dyslexic were the gifted people in the community for reading wasn't required. So we're going to talk about the fact that we have a one-sided view of dyslexia. And I'm going to begin with the help of Dr. Brock and his wife's, Dr. Brock Eide and his wife's work. I'll be talking more about that. Now, just a real quick, I have technical books that I think are really important. But for informal and inspiration, there's no better than J.T. Mestall, who has a pseudonym for his books called J.T. Jester. And JT has written a book called Untether, which is how he became untethered at fifth grade, sixth grade, from not being able to read to be able to read and break away all the feelings of ineptness and incompetency he had, break away and able to move into his strengths. His books are Untether, which is a wonderful book to read to your child, or if they can read, they read it, or just for you to read it. It's very inspirational. And then his newer book is No Bad Days. And you can, at the end, it'll tell you you can purchase the on his website. He also has developed a nonprofit organization where he gives speeches and lectures to kids who have learning disabilities. And he's a funny guy. That's why his pseudonym is JT Jester. Very funny guy. Okay. So when I'm talking about this, I'm going to be pulling in a lot of my experience of 50 years of working with kids with dyslexia. So though I'm pointing out very hard research, it's all going to work for me because I've experienced this. Slide one. This program is called Dyslexia 101. It's actually maybe advanced Dyslexia 101, but we'll call it dyslexia because I do have considerable research and brain work involved in this. Next. Okay, I have been in the field of dyslexia for 50 years and served as reading director at a variety of programs. At Denver Academy, I was program director. I trained in everything, reading, how to teach content courses, discipline, structure, you name it, I taught it. And trained all the teachers for 35 years. 15 years at Beyond Basics, where I am still the reading coordinator. My son now is doing the workshops I used to do there. Stern School, I was reading director there for 11 years, just recently moved on. And then LearnUp Centers, I've been working with Steve Hagler for 7 years. And this program, which has blossomed into, I think, the strongest remedial or developmental clinic in the country because of how thorough they are in the research and how well trained the teachers are. I know that because they have to go through me to be certified, and the training is really good. Next. Now, let's start with Dr. Sperry's work. And Sperry basically was research the difference between the right and left hemisphere. Now, this is my left hand, so you may be seeing this backwards, but you can see the left, and this is my right hand. You can see the right, okay, left. Now, the left hand hemisphere, I'm just going to pull a few of these while you look, is really dealing with analytical sequencing, language, any sequencing things like math, etc. And it's very sequential. So if a child has problems here, they're going to have problems both in math, not concepts, but math sequences and breaking the code for reading. Now, the right hemisphere is more holistic, more intuitive. And it basically deals with nonverbal skills, adventure, really good at social areas, social reading, creative imagination. So you have the left which is language, abstract cognition, reading development, and the right hemisphere is spatial nonverbal. Now, we used to think we use 15% of the brain. We now know we use 100%. And therefore, when you are reading, you're not just using left, you're using left and right. That the left allows you to decode, read the words, etc. The right helps you interpret, be able to deal with metaphors, similes, a lot of deep connections. So they have different paths. The problem is children with dyslexia have less cells have migrated to the cortex. So I'm going to pull out the brain. And as you can see, we have a brain here. And this brain.
I'm right before it started hurting the most and heard a crack.
Here's the right. Excuse me, Tara. Okay. All right. So we have the brain here, and we have the motor part, which is here in the brain. It's up front. And the motor part connects, interesting, is very close to the face and hands. That's why kids who have oral motor problems or will often have problems with finger dexterity, handwriting, and may also have articulation problems. Notice because they're so closely related. Here is fingers, face, and hands. Now this area connects to this area, which is called Wernicke's area, or the temporal lobe. And Wernicke's area here is the one that understands. So this area, Broca, has to connect with this area. And this is the problem. When cells migrate to the cortex, we're finding that some cells are not getting to these language areas. They're just not migrating there. Now, so in a child who reads well, they sound out words, okay? They understand words. And then in back, right here, where the occipital is touching the temporal, back here is where the word form area is here. And this is the one that basically makes pictures of words. And this is a big problem for kids with dyslexia. This area is not working. And often they're not connected to this area, which is the temporal lobe in this area, and Broca's area. So we have a lack of connection. We're not connecting from Broca to the temporal lobe to the visual, okay? And that's a problem. Now, the right hemisphere is dealing with all the spatial concepts. Now, when you pull the brain apart, as I'm going to do, you'll see the white matter inside. That's called the corpus callosum, both sides of, and when you put it together, that allows this side of the brain to talk to this side of the brain, this side to this side, corpus callosum. Therefore, you have access to both sides of the brain. However, kids with dyslexia, we found some cells, when they move from the early, what's called the tube, from the tube up to the brain, they just don't reach various areas of left brain. More of them move into the right brain. And in fact, in brain studies, the right hemisphere, this hemisphere is a little larger than the left, especially down here in this area. Down here, it's called the Sylvian fissure. It's a little larger. And that can partly explain their gifts. Okay, next. So we actually have a difference with kids with dyslexia. Notice I'm saying kids with dyslexia, not dyslexic kids. That whole thing has to change, because kids with dyslexia are kids with unbelievable mind strengths. Okay, so in our next slide after here, we're going to talk about how the research of Shaywitz in her book is mentioned. And Shaywitz found, if you'll look at the brain, the first brain, big brain, you'll notice that Broca's area, which I had shown was here, Broca's area, and the temporal lobe, the Wernicke's area, which is the second big circle on the brain, and then the bottom smaller circle, the word form area, are all connected. So when a child has information coming into the Broca's area and they sound out a word, they're sounding that out, the Wernicke's area, which is in the temporal lobe, goes, oh, I know that word. And then the word form area starts making connections, so it becomes a sight word. Now, if we look at the dyslexic, Broca's area is not really impaired, but it's not being used properly, and they don't connect to the temporal or word form area, and that's the problem. So kids who have full connections, like the non-impaired, learn reading pretty much, a lot of them with any method. But children who have less gifts in those areas must have phonics. So if we look back at the brain cut in half, we see that Broca's area, the front, and there you go. Then you got the Wernicke's area, which is the middle, and then the word form area, which is the post, are working together. Whereas with the dyslexic, the child with dyslexia, the left part of the brain is not working as well. And so the right tries to take over, but it's inefficient. So they start using pictures and context and guessing. Okay. So we have the healthy brain, healthy for linguistics, has no problem. The child with a dyslexic brain, the left side is having issues. Keep in mind, though, their right side is well developed, so they have gifts, a set of gifts that most left brain individuals don't have as well. Okay. Next slide. So consequences of this neurological issue. Number one, phonemic awareness and phonics problems. Now, phonemic awareness, you basically can find early on, and you'll see that, but that's to be aware of sounds within words. So an example is bat, don't say but, and the child can go at. Hit, don't say he can go it. Bat, don't say t, they can go ba. Bag, don't say g, they can go ba. Bit, change the it to an m, bet. That's all phonemic awareness. Phoneme means the sound. Now, a lot of individuals work with syllables. That's good when the child's young, like age 3, early 4, but it does not correlate with reading. Phonemic awareness. It'll correlate with phonemic awareness. It'll get the kid to breaking things down, like talcum. Let's tap out talcum. Talcum. Getting them the idea of breaking things down. But it's the phonemic awareness that correlates with reading. The next thing is naming speed. And naming speed predicts fluency. Now, their naming speed test is on letter naming. That could just be as easily done with the sounds. And the sounds are what predict reading success, not names. Now, the names correlate to reading success, but not for the reason you'd think. They correlate to reading success because kids who know the names have often been taught and read to by their parents, or they've been to a good kindergarten that taught letter names, or they have a linguistic strength and just have picked it up through whatever. But letter names are being focused. But for reading, no letter names initially. It's always the phonic sounds. And I'll be showing that. Yeah, it's just interference. Some people say, well, the letter names, you get an idea how to sound out a word. So you see BAT, you go B8. Well, that doesn't work well, nearly as well as but, at, bat. There's just no comparison. And, I found this out 30 years ago. Now the literature is more balanced in terms of the sounds, but it's embedded. Visual processing is sometimes the child's a little blurry in both their hearing, auditory, and visual, and there's a neurological blurring. Their saccadics or movements of their eyes are shorter. I think part of that is they're just seeing such short syllables, but their movement is shorter, a little visual, but it is not the major issue I see. Now, procedural problem like phonics rules, math facts, grammar is a huge issue for kids with dyslexia. And part of that is they're blurring their neurons blur a bit when they work together. And so they'll see a variability of the sound. If they're hearing it, they'll see a little variability of the letter. So the cerebellum, which is down here, and on the brain, it's very back of the brain. Okay, this area here. The cerebellum really helps with procedures, but if this area is getting inconsistent information, it can't help with the procedures. Kids with procedural problems have trouble with phonics, rules, math, facts, and grammar. Almost every child I've seen with dyslexia has trouble with math, facts. And last is working memory. Now, we get all kinds of diagnostics about the child. He's ADD, he doesn't pay attention, he forgets a lot, a lot of different. It really comes down to the working of dyslexia with working memory and the working with phonics and working memory. Phonics stresses his working memory, okay? And in stressing his working memory, it causes his inability to kind of pull sounds together. Now let's look at preschool, the preschool years. What are some of the presenting problems? Well, first thing is they have trouble with nursery rhymes. Jack and Jill and Humpty Dumpty. And you want to work the child with these and then eventually have them fill in the rhymes when they rhyme. But working with nursery rhymes, if they really have big problems, that's one of your lack. Or appreciation of rhymes if you give words. Like if you will show 3 pictures. This is a great technique, and it does correlate with first grade success. Is you'll have 3 pictures of a bat, a club, and a hat. And the child will say it, bat, club, hat. Which ones belong together? Which ones rhyme? Which doesn't belong together? That's also called oddities. They have a lack of appreciation. Now, kids who have done this exercise, where you'll have like 3 words and one doesn't rhyme and the others do, fig, rig, and sag, which one doesn't fit, okay, and why? That also is a predictor. They mispronounce words all the time. So tornado might be ornado. Volcano might be locano. The spaghetti will be paschetti, which I still do myself. And they'll have baby talk, but they really have trouble with big words. And part of that is their working memory. Remember, the 2 real issues with the child is the working memory along with their difficulty with the auditory system that's needed for phonics. Okay. Now, difficulty in learning and remembering names of letters and numbers. Now, as I've mentioned before, I think, though most of them will have taught the letter names, I teach the letter sounds as soon as possible. Kids can learn, we know this from work in Canada, in Jolly Phonics. The kids can learn all the basic sounds, and by 4.5, and even earlier. But by 4.5, your child should know the basic sounds for vowels and consonants. And they might not know the letters in their own name. Okay, next. All right, K to first grade. Just knowing that words come apart. Easily name the letters of the alphabet. Now, these are predictors. They're not, again, what I want to focus on, which is I'd be saying sounds, but most people don't teach the sounds. They just teach the alphabet. They can't write the letters. They're just beginning to learn letter sound matches at kindergarten. Again, my belief, you can get the sounds in at 4.5. It's not my belief, it's research. They should be beginning to decode simple words, recognize as many as 50 or more sight words. They invent a spelling, but not with letter names won't help you. If you're trying to spell the word tag, T-A-G doesn't help you, but tag, T-A-G does. That's why sounds are so important. So invented spellings would be with sounds, not letter names don't help you. Letter names don't really help you do much except your name. You're starting to begin to spell some simple words correctly. You'll know a bit about print conventions, like where print goes, top and bottom, indenting, things like that. You have a growing vocabulary and you look forward to reading. Now, studies in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000 indicated the #1 predictor for first grade success was the child could read and spell 3-letter words, like my top here. Can we enlarge that a bit if possible? The top area? That's a little larger. So that means entering first grade, if they could read web, fox, hip, fan, buzz, and spell those, that was the #1 predictor for success. And obviously, why is that? Well, #1, they know phonemic awareness. They can cut off sounds. They know the consonants and vowel sounds. They can sequence. And they can put together 3 letters together. And then they can encode or bring it out by writing it or moving letters to spell it. Okay. Now, for upper grades, if your child's in first grade and's been through a kindergarten that actually teaches this, and they break down here, they have a problem. Unfortunately, some kindergartens think it's not good to teach any kind of phonics in kindergarten. They should just have fun. Huge, huge mistake. In which case, they're not even going to learn this to first grade. Okay. But really, by the time children enter first grade, they should know this. And you could talk to your kindergarten teacher and ask, are you learning the consonants and vowels? Are you learning basic words? And in my program called Tattum Reading, our kindergarten program, we teach 4 sound consonants and 1 vowel, and we have a book written for it. We get them reading right away. We get them spelling right away. Within the first few days, we get this kid working, because reading with what you print solidifies it. Now, if you're in 2nd, 3rd grade and you're breaking down at 1 to 5, you're in big trouble. You got to need remedial training or developmental training right away. And if you're in 2nd, 3rd grade and you can't get through the first 10 words, you're in trouble. But if you're in 2nd and 3rd grade and you do okay on the first 2 lists and are breaking down at list, the 3rd list, 11 and through 16, and you're in 3rd or 4th grade, you're not in big trouble, but you're at a higher level of start, which we'll talk about. You don't start at the beginning of the program. Of course, as you move down or up the reading survey, you'll see that we have advanced words, and this allows us to pick out the good readers. Yeah, like if you'll look at 31, nauseous and optimistic, exaggerates, circumference, symmetrical, this helps you pick out the good readers. And also comprehension problems, because when they read a couple of these, like especially the passages from 21 and 26, if they don't have a clue about what any of this means, that's a good possibility we have a comprehension problem. They can read, but they don't understand. And that'll be explained more in depth in later workshops. Let's go ahead. Next. Letter sounds as early as preschool teach sounds. Like I said, 4.5. All kids are from Jolly Phonics, which, by the way, is one of the programs I'll be recommending, is Jolly Phonics in Canada. And then read daily to child. That's been known forever. Now, initially, when you're reading, you just enjoy it. You'll be talking to pictures. You'll be reading. You'll be talking, discussing it. You won't be asking questions. Then later on, when you're reading, you'll point to the words that you read to show the child there's individual words. And then you'll ask some of the W questions. And I put the first 2 W's together. Who or what did what? And the child can point to those. Who's the who? What'd they do? Who's the what? What'd they do? What did it do? Who or what did what? Then the when and where question, which you can also point to. Who or what did what, where, when, and then why? Why did that happen? Why did this happen? Okay. So those are basic. We have more depth in our program, but if you just know the W's, if your child can do the who or what, you're in good ground. Who or what did what, pardon me, who or what. And then the where, when, and why gives you more. The beauty of those is you can point to the who or what did what, the where, the when, and the why you can often point to how you came up with it. Well, I think he's a troublemaker. How do you know that? He threw pudding on the wall. Okay. All right. Then rhymes, working on oddities again is what doesn't belong. Hit, shop, bit, shop doesn't belong. The other 2 rhyme. Tapping out syllables before 4.5. By 4.5, you want to be working at sounds, but tapping out syllables early, and then playing with as much as possible rhyming and nursery rhymes. Now let's look at the sounds. Okay. Now this is how we connect the sounds, and I'm going to go through this with you. You're going to be seeing me here. And I'm going to lower my screen a little so you can see better. Okay, so if we can lower the, okay, so the first sound, I'm going to do the consonant first. So you have b. Now the mistake everybody makes, teachers make, everybody, is they'll call that b. It's not b, nor is it ka, nor is it da, nor is it fa. It's just not that. It's not fa la 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 la. Okay, it's b. And we remember it this way: as the baby's rocking, the mother might go b b b. So we have the pitcher and the rock. Then we have C is cutting. It's not ka, ka, ka. If you're having trouble with that, listen to this a lot. Cut off the and that's what I do with the child when they put I'll say cut it off, cut off the D is like a drummer. D, 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 d. F is like a flag. G is like you're drinking. G, 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 g. H is like you're running. J is like starting a car in the old days. G, 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 G. Okay. K is like kicking. Just like C. L is like licking. Pops on, you know, it could be popsicle, ice cream. Okay. M is like something tastes good. You're rubbing your tummy. Mmm. Okay. Mmm. N is like a horse. P is like, notice it's not pa. Cut that off if you're doing that. R is not your mouth is straight. It's puckered mouth. Big mistake all teachers make. See, and that, if you're doing that and you're sounding out a word, you'll be going like for but it's from. Okay. So like a lion. S is like a snake. T is like a clock. V is like a vacuum cleaner. W is like a washing machine. What? Notice that has a little voiced sound. One of the only. X is like you're sneezing. And it's like you're making a little X with your fingers. Y is like you're yawning. Yeah. Z is like a zipper. So review these a lot. And make sure you're cutting off the uhs. Have somebody listen to you and say, am I putting an after it? Problem for all teachers. There's so many phonics teachers that are doing that. Now the vowels, you got I, which is like you're itchy. I, you're scratching. Itch. I. It's like you're having a little trouble hearing. And you have a seashell, and that's helping you hear the echo, 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 is like crying, is like you're confused. You have a little U here. You're hitting your forehead. It's like you're confused. Is you go to the doctor and your head's back. Now again, Canadians especially have trouble with that. They'll call it more aw. You got to open your mouth for aw, which is AU, is in your belly. You look downward. Is in the head. Okay. So those are them. I'm going to do a 10-second or 1-minute review. Let's go back to the start. Oh, we're fine. All right. Let's just follow me. B, d, f, g, h, j, k, l, m, n, p, r, s, t, v, w, x, y, z, I, Next. Okay, we're at halfway and we're right where we should be on time. Now, here's what a good phonics program should have. Both a basic and advanced code. The basic code has one-to-one correspondence. That means you don't have multiple sounds you got to try. Tattum reading is all based on the basic code for the first, some series for like 10, 12 books, the basic code is introduced. But it introduces one-to-one correspondence, then adds where there's more than one-to-one correspondence as we get to higher books, but have a basic code. So my kindergarten books are all dealing with the short vowels and the consonants, all one-to-one concepts, correspondence. Phonetically aligned books. You can't do phonics and then read something that's not phonetically controlled. I feel so strongly about that. I've written over 110 books. I wrote books for kindergarten that are phonetically controlled, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, high school, adult. So I've written series that all start with the beginning code. And and I wrote all those books because some books are so foolish, the kids hate them, especially older kids that are given like dumb phonics books. Whereas my series, like for junior high kids, is Moonlight Tales. Titles like The French Quarter Phantom, The Martian Raptor, Caribbean Crisis. They're all wild books, but phonetically controlled. Okay. Now, sounds, I connect them to movements because I find the kids relate to that and it gets them moving. Now, eventually I'll take away the movements, of course, and just point to the sounds and they'll say it. But initially, when I point to the sounds, they'll do the movement and say it. So if I point to b, they'll be going b, b, b. If I point to k, they'll be going k. Eventually, I want to move away from that where they just say the sounds. I found flashcards, or you can also tie to mouth positions like Lips did in Lindemood. Lips was a great phonics program by Charles and Patricia Lindemood. It's now moved in a different direction, but the Lips program was one of the better phonetic programs that were out there when it was pure and done the way Charles and Phil and Patricia and their daughter Phyllis did. High intensity sessions, a little dab will do, it won't work. Our phonics lessons can be up a good hour long, and in a class, they should be a good hour long. And 20 minutes of that needs to be reading. I don't know how many phonics programs I've seen where they do phonics the whole time and they never read. 20 minutes of ours day one. And in a kindergarten kid, within the first week, is reading. Okay, high intensity sessions. Yeah, daily review of sounds. So every day you're quickly reviewing auditorily, where you're going, but, and they point to it, and then you point. So both auditory first and then pointing. Use of nonsense words for reading and spelling. And so I'll usually start, let me have it sip here. I'll usually start with the nonsense words, and they're all in my manual. Orally, so I'll go fit, and the child will be saying the sounds as they're putting them out. It. Then I'll make changes, make it bit, and they'll go make a change bit. And I'll make it bat, and they'll make a change bat. Make it bath, they'll make a change. So I'll start orally, and then visually I'll make words and make one change multiple times. And that's working on the sequencing. But what it's really doing is reinforcing the sounds in a practical way. Okay. And then spelling and writing. Spelling, you're spelling the sounds you've learned. And basically studies show that given a summary is one of your best comprehensions you can do in spelling. Now, initially for very poor spellers, I'll do the writing, or writers, I'll start the writing. Then I will have them do a sentence and we'll alternate and eventually turn it over. Now, I have found that for older kids, you do not have to do handwriting associated with it. Many programs require the fact that you're doing handwriting along with the font, which slows the whole thing down. I find that a lot of kids have motor problems and that they're going to be using the keyboard anyway. I also do have a handwriting program. I call it baseball handwriting. But there's others. You can do any handwriting program. But I have found it's not, you definitely don't have to do writing to become a better reader. That comes back to the research of Sam Orton. And he's one of the founders of the Orton-Gillingham method, along with Gillingham and she had a colleague who was a psychologist, I believe. But the Orton was influenced a lot by Fernald, which was all about tracing. And that's how you tie letters. And now, don't get me wrong, writing letters and that can reinforce it. But I found out through Lindemood, Lips, They did not include writing as one of the problem. They did other motor activities, which I do as well, that cemented this. So this is a break. But in a kindergarten, first grade program, they should be linked. Okay. And there's a lot of good kindergarten, first grade programs, a lot of good Orton programs, et cetera, for kindergarten first. But as you move beyond first, this is where there's problems, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The last is reading with students at least 20 minutes a period. Again, I don't know how many teachers, phonics teachers I've talked to who said, well, I have to start with dictionary, spell and read sounds. And with the flashcards, that takes like 15 minutes. And I have a new concept. Then I have to do handwriting. And then I have to do spelling. Then I have to do blends. And the period's over. I don't know how many. I might have 10 minutes if I'm lucky to read. No, that doesn't work. 20 minutes of reading. And my schedule is set to help with that. Okay, next slide. Different approaches. Now, here is the major difference between our program, our view of kids who have a problem with dyslexia, but the gift of the mind, okay, is the categorical versus dimensional. Now, categorical is where a child is tested, and if they test a certain point, they're considered dyslexic or problem readers, and the rest are okay. It's not the case at all. Dimensional reading recognizes very clearly, there's no clear cutoff, that you have some kids who have severe reading problems, but you have some who had some intuitive abilities and picked up more than that. And then you have others that have major gaps, et cetera. And none of these get filled in the categorical approach. So now when you're in a categorical approach, if you're diagnosed as dyslexic, most of the time you're put in a program that'll do a few sounds a day using what are called linkages. And it's a 2-year program, gets about 2 years growth. And it's, you know, can be very successful with first graders. You know, if you're 2 years, you're second grade reader. Key thing, if you're using that approach in classroom, you're going to have gifted readers. You must have them reading from a book bag, books they like, and doing writing about those books and having meetings with them on a regular basis. You can't just do phonics with you do phonics with everything to help spelling and word attack. But when it comes to the reading books, there's kids who can already read Harry Potter in first grade. We don't want them reading that, but we want a book bag of the great books and let them read during the reading period. Okay. That's such a shame. It's kind of you're forming a problem on the other end. You're now focusing all on phonics and you're taking away the love of reading for those who can read. That's real important. Now, the dimensional approach recognizes there's not a set line. And so all students begin reading in the first few days, usually day one, unless they are a beginning kindergarten kid who knows nothing. But almost all our kids start reading 20 minutes a day, day one, because we start where they're at. Now, this approach increases attention. Attention is the #1 problem with reading. There's, a couple major issues going on in reading. One is what's called phonemic problems, the inability to get the sounds. And it's also called phonological processing. They have trouble with that because the cells, when they migrated, did not migrate properly to the left hemisphere. Many of them went to the right hemisphere. So the problem with sounds, the inability, and that's the blurring that's occurring in their neurons. They're not hearing the sound clearly, and they're hearing it at different times, and the cerebellum is getting mixed messages. And then in seeing, their eyes will move back and forth a bit. Don't recommend eye training. Studies do not support it in reading, unless you want to use, if there's a problem with myopia or other problems that need glasses, absolutely. But your phonics, we found out that kids when reading will show eye problems because they keep going, their eyes keep going backwards. But good readers, their eyes are fine. So we don't really focus on that. We're focusing on the program. Now, our program, which has really interesting books at all levels, increase attention span. Part of it, working memory isn't needed as much because we've got the sounds in so they can sound out the book. They're not guessing every other word. We will do a review at times. And the books are of interest to the child. So they want to read them, and interest helps take care of a lot of both attention and short-term memory problems because you're into it. If you're not into it, you're bored. That's what happens with flashcards a lot. Kids just get bored. They're not processing the information because they're not motivated. Then they have attention issues. A lot of the attention is simply because they're overwhelmed in their auditory, the left hemisphere. They're overwhelmed there. And they therefore are losing attention because of that. And they're having trouble holding things in working memory. Next. Okay. High intensity tutoring for students with dyslexia. One-to-one tutoring. This is a child with severe dyslexia. This has been my experience. I've seen a child who's a very beginning of phonics needed a straight phonics in a class where they were kind of working at a higher level of phonics and they didn't grow at all. And then I worked with him the next year and he still didn't grow much because he didn't have the background. You need for the severe kid intensive, daily, hour a day. You can do a group of 3 if you have 3 kids at the same level. But the problem is when you put them in a regular phonics class in school, they won't be able to keep up. And so you're doing phonics, but you're going to lose the kid who needs it the most. So you need one-on-ones. It needs to be done daily, 2 to 6 months intensive. So we have intensives in our clinic, Tattum Reading, and we can tell you pretty much based on where your child enters the program, where they'll be in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months. And we know that from 7 years of our research with kids. So it's not like a guessing game. If you come in at a particular level, and we don't start everyone at the beginning, we'll have them at the beginning, middle, or end of the program. We start them where they are, and we can pretty much tell you where you'll be. You want to practice reading at home, and you want to have daily fluency exercises. Now, one of the things the best parents, when you read to your kids, is read with emotion, and then have your child kind of echo that with you. This helps what's called prosody. So, look out, he yelled. Tell me you say that with me. Look out, he yelled. Notice he's yelling. So you want to use prosody and teach the children, how to use that orally.
And Steve, I did just want to let you know we have about 10 minutes left here.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next. Okay. Now, here is where the new kind of brain has been found out by doctors Brock Eide and his wife. That basically kids have what are called material abilities, the ability to rotate objects in space mentally. It's important for engineers, it's important for multiple jobs. These kids are often doing great with Legos. Almost all my kids were Lego kids. Then they make interconnections that others don't. So they will make a connection between maybe something they saw on TV to something they did with a game to something they saw here, and they'll be able to make a coherent thing out of it. They have the ability to tell stories. J.T. Mestall is a good example. He's written 2 books. He was a child who in language had severe dyslexia, but in the mind had all the mind strengths. Okay, and then you have dynamic reasoning. This is the ability to take your past and future, or past and present, and predict future. Entrepreneurs, 40% of them are kids who had dyslexia. Next slide. This shows a little more in depth as you review this. And notice at the bottom, the end strengths, spatial, visual thinking, and navigating, like in the woods, that kind of thing. Our kids, if you walk them through an area, they will be able to find their way back to that area without trouble. So this is a slide you can study. Material strengths are abilities that help us reason about physical or material world, about shape, size, motion, position, orientation, and space of physical action, and the way those objects interact. Next. Then you have, after material strengths, interconnected. And this is the ability to see how phenomena like objects, ideas, events are all related to each other, okay? And ability to see multiple perspectives, and the ability to unite all kinds of information. So if you'll look at the bottom, it says interconnected thinking, pattern detection, big picture. Next. Narrative is the storyteller. and it has to do with personal memories and scene creation. And these are where kids can connect scenes of mental scenes from the past or whatever and connect them. And from that, they can use them to explain the present or guess at the future. But they're great storytellers, even though many writers are people with dyslexia. They had trouble breaking the left side, the code, but their right side imagery, the ability to make connections, the ability to retain stories was well developed. Next slide. The big one is dynamic reasoning. And this is the ability for them to take their past and the present and make predictions based on that. They're able to make practical or best fit predictions on working hypotheses. Again, 40% of entrepreneurs have dyslexia. So back in the days before reading was important, the mind people, these people are the mind trees, were the go-to people. They were the ones who could build the houses. They were the one who shoed the horses. They're the one who were the blacksmiths. They're the one who figured out the fort. They're the one you came to explore, to remember your past. They were the go-to. And those who couldn't do it, were left brain, were mindlexia. They had problems with the mind, these areas. There's no such word, of course, but back in that day, they would be, if they had a name and they knew mind, they'd say, well, he has mindlexia. He can't find his way out of the woods. He can't build a house. He can't shoe horses. He can't predict things. Okay. Dyslexia, as again, a new definition, has two problems. One is the phonemic awareness and problems with phonics, left sequential. And the gift is visual spatial, and interpersonal is a huge gift. When J.T. Mestall, who's I'm recommending his books, came to me at 5th grade, he was one of the lowest students I had. He couldn't read that first line I showed you, 3-letter words. As soon as I saw him, his interpersonal strengths were so great. I just looked at parents and said, I'm going to teach this kid to read. I don't care what. He had better emotional skills than I had, and he was only in 5th grade. That's not saying a lot, but it was pretty impressive. Okay, next. Okay, so let's review our strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths are of the mind, which is incredible strengths on the right hemisphere. Now, it's not just the right hemisphere. We've also known that there's a gray matter covering it, it's millimeters thick, and that has 6 little levels to it. It's on top of all of that brain structure. It's a little gray area. It's called the cortex. That has 6 levels. We found that kids with dyslexia, the 6 levels are further apart from each other. Whereas kids without dyslexia, they're closer. Autistic are really close. Now, what that means is kids with dyslexia form further connections, and that's what allows them to make these elaborate predictions, allows them to give deeper thought about words. It allows them to not be quick with information, but to have information available that pulls together, that's connecting areas, that helps develop stories, etc. Whereas kids with a strong left hemisphere have them close together. And these are kids who can do sounds real quickly. They have one definition for words. Kids with dyslexia will often have multiple definitions. They'll have one definition, and they can do everything very quickly because they're very close. Kids with autism, they found many of them have very close connections. So you have these 6 layers in the cortex in combination with more right hemisphere, in combination with the noise that is causing some inconsistency in hearing in that prevents planning in the cerebellum. These are all issues that come up. But so you have the weakness based on the sequential, then you have the strengths of the mind. So when from now on, you want to be thinking phonological problems, spatial gifts, real simple. Phonological problems, spatial gifts. Phonological, anything dealing with sequence, spatial having to do with anything dealing with space, including people, interpersonal skills, all that. Left, right. Okay, for sources, I recommend three technical sources. The book I'd read whole right off the bat is Dyslexic Advantage by Drs. Brock and Finette Edie. this is where I pulled all my information on the mind, though it was very consistent with my observing of kids all the way back to JT. But it gives you in-depth information about dyslexia, but it has tons of stories about kids with right hemisphere gifts and their success. And it's just a wonderful book to get an overview, to read straight through. Overcoming Dyslexia, I've used for the idea of the problems with the Broca's, Wernicke's, and word formula. That's a very technical book. You can read that, but it should be a resource because it tells you how to contact professionals, what materials to get, what to do for college. Yeah, it gives you all this technical stuff you can use as a reference. If your child's been through phonics and it's been unsuccessful, Dyslexic Empowerment Plan by Ben Foss was written by him. He had phonics, didn't work. And this gave him skills using dictation, reading books on tape, et cetera, et cetera. And this is also important for kids dyslexia going into high school because it gives them skills they will need. Now, non-technical and inspirational books, Untethered by J.T. Jester, No Bad Days by J.T. and Can't, and you can find them at www.jtjester.com. Now, I have about 6 minutes for questions, but I can go over if you want. Do we have any questions in the chat or any questions that come?
I don't think we have any questions in the chat yet, so we wanted to just open up the floor to anyone who
Why
would
don't we
like to
just
jump in
open up
with questions.
the verbal? Let's just put everyone's mic on. And whoever yells out first, I'll answer your question. So anyone, do I have a question? Don't be intimidated. There's no stupid questions.
Hey, Steve,
Yes.
it's John.
Hey, John. I
Hey.
remember you from something. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
go ahead, John.
Question for you. I'm dealing, everything that you've talked about is great and wonderful. I'm working with some older gentlemen,
Okay,
mid 60s.
good. My program's meant for them.
Okay. And
Yeah.
the one gentleman is really struggling with short sounds, and ah,
Good.
and very pretty consistently mixes them up, struggles, gets confused with them.
So what you got to do with him is say, listen, we're going to play with this. Let's give it a laugh because it's really stupid. Okay. To help you with it, we're going to get itch. Now you try it. Itch. Now let's try is kind of stupid. You're having a little trouble hearing something. So you've got to see sound you're hearing echo. You put the keyword. I did this with a 65-year-old woman who had aphasia. We nailed all the vowels and got her reading the 5th grade. And she had she couldn't read anything when she started, but we used the movements with her. So he's got to make sure he doesn't feel stupid with that.
Yeah, because I can get him back to what's your key word for E.
Keywords are problematic.
He'll know he'll know it. He'll know itch. He'll know echo. But when he's looking at it or when he tries to hear it, very often and is his hardest sound.
Okay, here's what you do though, Joe. I don't believe in flashcards, by the way. I've worked flashcards for years. Bores kids to death. Bores them to death. And it doesn't help you when you're reading. So when he's sounding out the word yet, I'll do this. And that keys him to yet. Okay. When he's going to read FAT, and I'll go, oh, I'll give him the key. Notice there's no interference. See, keywords put in what's called proactive interference. It said interferes with what they've learned, and they have working memory problems. They can't hold it, but they can hold this because they see it. Oh, so I'd add that. And so I gave you those on the website or in the lecture.
Yeah, no, I got those. He's online, so we'll try that online.
Right, and we got books for older kids or older adults. I have a historical fiction. I taught history.
Yeah, he's reading Late in the Dark Ages right now.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Good. Well, he's cooking.
He can read, but many times he will either just drop the last half of the word. He'll either put on a new ending or he'll change it. And then if I go back, and try and have him look at it, he's got a better chance of getting it right. But a lot of times he just has never heard the word before either.
Oh, fine.
So
Just give it to him. If
Yeah.
I know he hasn't heard the word it comes across, I read it for he has a chance.
yeah, like Charlemagne, he never heard
Yeah,
of Charlemagne.
absolutely. I don't even have him try it.
Yeah.
Number one is self-concept. So if
Yeah.
I have a couple tough words, I'll say them, but they should be listed in the words before the story, the tough words.
Yeah, we go through those.
Great. Yeah.
And then he'll drop off. He'll either add S's or drop off S's pretty consistently.
Not a big deal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about that. Okay. I better, any more questions? How about you, Melissa? You good to go? Oh, you got your speaker off. Okay. All right. Well, I guess
did
the
have a
presentation-
question actually,
Yes.
Steve. I was in your presentation, you kind of talked a lot about or like emphasizing the importance of like high intensity sessions, which are like, you know, an hour each day or daily practices. Why is that kind of consistency in practice important, especially for students with dyslexia?
Yeah, because the child has procedural issues and has difficulty remembering procedures, and they have neural conflict, they're not picking it up. Without the daily, they'll forget. How many times have teachers said, I taught him this, he knew it yesterday and he doesn't know it today? That's because of the neural kind of flexibility and the inability to process and hold that pattern. And very normal in kids with dyslexia. The daily progress keeps things together and helps to set procedures for them, which is very difficult. Without a daily, and you got a severe kid, which I call a start one, you know, you must do it daily, in either one or groups of three. So, great. Any other questions? If not, we'll be doing others at some point, either here or on my website, one way or another. We're going to be doing more presentations. So be on the lookout for them. Thank you for your help. We'll see you guys later.
Well, thank you all
Thank you,
for
Steve.
attending. This recording will
What?
be shared as well.
Hey, and you too, Stan.